Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, let's get to our next guest. We're delighted to have him here. Safe to say he changed how we think about grocery stores, supermarkets, made us start to care about how and who is producing the food we eat. John Mackey co-founded Whole Foods Market back in 1980. Amazon bought it in 2017. One store in Austin now, more than 500 today in the United States, in the UK, and Canada. John co-authored a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling book. It was titled Conscious Capitalism, Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business. And his follow-up was Conscious Leadership, Elevating Humanity Through Business. He's written cookbooks about diet, health, longevity, and more. Now he's written about his personal and professional journey as CEO of Whole Foods for more than 40 years. It's all in that new book. It is entitled The Whole Story, Adventures in Love, Life, and Capitalism. We welcome John Mackey here in our Bloomberg Interactive Story. Hello, how are you?
Fantastic.
It's great to have you here. So I want to start with where you guys started. And I'm curious what you think turned out even better than you thought from that first single store in Austin, and what might you have liked to have seen gone differently if you could change things?
I mean, we were just kids. Renee and by the time it opened, I was 25, Renee was 21. So I didn't have a business background, neither did she. But we were very young and idealistic and energetic. And the first store was actually called Safer Way back in 1978. It was a vegetarian store. And we just wanted to sell healthy food to people, earn a living, and have some fun. I mean, and in a lot of ways, that continued all through Whole Foods Market's destiny. We didn't have big growth plans. That kind of came along after we relocated that first store, which was in an old Victorian house on a non-commercial street. It was not a great place for a store, but the first real Whole Foods Market, when we also merged with another small natural food store that were our friends, and together we changed the brand to Whole Foods Market. Fantastic location, and the store just took off. And then we had a terrible flood 9 months after we opened up. We knew we built in the 100-year flood zone. Yeah. But we had a 100-year flood in the first year, and it had been 70 years since there had been a flood like that in Austin. So that caused us to need to get a second store, and then that was successful too, and then a third store, and then I suppose we really started thinking bigger back in 1989 when we opened our first store in California. We were California dreaming, and we opened one in the Bay Area in Palo Alto, California. That took off, and it's kind of like, wow, maybe we could even be a national company. So it's just. It changed a lot, but it wasn't like we were MBA students that had done this market research and decided we were going to build this national company. We were just young kids kind of having fun. And
for lack of a better term, it was much more organic than that.
Very, very good, Tim. You got it.
Thank you.
Ouch. Hey, would you have liked anything to have gone differently? Like if you could change things?
You know, a question I get asked a lot by media is something like, if you could go back and tell your younger self, what would you want to tell your younger self? And I kind of have three jokes that go along with that. The first joke is, it wouldn't matter, he wouldn't have listened to me. And the second joke is, I would have told him not to get involved with that woman. And the third one is the truth. I don't think I would tell him anything because, I mean, not that I didn't make any mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes, and I could have saved that younger self from making mistakes, but then I wouldn't have learned the lessons I needed to learn. Yeah. And it all turned out so well, right? So
even the sale to Amazon,
I think so.
Good with it.
Yeah. I mean, people ask me if I have regrets. Do you regret selling to Amazon? And the answer is no. I regret the circumstances that made that the best alternative for us. It was the best alternative. If I could go back to that time, I'd make the same exact decision. And the deal has worked out pretty well for Whole Foods. I mean, people don't realize that Amazon let us drop our prices. We needed to lower our prices to combat the whole paycheck narrative. And they helped us. We couldn't have done that on our own as a public company, not easily. It would have been, the markets wouldn't have tolerated the short-term sell-off in the stock. But we dropped it 4 times in the first 2 years under Amazon. They took the long-term view. And then they also raised the pay of everybody in our company in the first 6 months. They they went in with a $15 minimum wage, and everybody else had to go up from there. So Amazon, and then when COVID hit, I mean, how could Whole Foods have possibly done all that delivery? Amazon's technology. So Amazon was a great partner for Whole Foods.
It's been a couple of years since you retired as CEO, and I'm wondering if today you can walk into a Whole Foods and just buy something?
You mean without being recognized?
Not without being recognized, but without being critical, or without finding yourself that you're working, or without finding yourself, can you just go in there and shop without thinking about this was your entire career?
Yeah. A couple of points. The first one is, if you're an entrepreneur and you create a business, it's a little bit like you're a parent and you have a child. Your child grows up and you can guide that child, but the child's not you, and the child's going to make some choices you don't agree with, and that's okay. You still love your child. So is Whole Foods doing exactly everything I would if I was still CEO? And the answer is, of course not. But one of the gifts that I gave to my successor, Jason Beekle, who is the one I wanted. I picked Jason, and Amazon.
We just caught up with him at Milken.
Yeah, Jason's amazing. And one of my gifts to him was not to be hovering and watching and second guessing him. Just, as I have a mantra now, it's not my problem any longer. And that's a gift to Jason, because then people aren't coming to me complaining about stuff. They know I'm not going to listen to them.
Conscious capitalism. You co-founded that movement, and simply put, it's right. We're thinking about business benefiting everybody, multiple stakeholders. Many would argue, we talk about it in the business environment too, right? A lot of investors saying, got to think about multiple stakeholders. The Business Roundtable talks about it. So, I feel like we talk a lot, John, about the wealthier individuals at a company are doing really, really well, and it's not necessarily trickling down. Has conscious capitalism, I'm curious how that has evolved in thought for you, if it still holds.
I mean, conscious capitalism's now, I feel like it's being attacked on two fronts. It's being attacked, the traditional capitalists are attacking it because they're concerned. They don't want to lose control. They don't want the owners to lose control of the business, and rightly so. The owners and the investors get paid last after all the other stakeholders are paid. But then we'll say on the left, the anti-capitalist, they're trying to weaponize it in order to take power from traditional capitalism. And it's like, no, conscious capitalism is not an economic system. It's a management philosophy. It just really has some very basic principles. First principle is that every business has this potential for higher purpose besides only making money. I mean, my body produces red blood cells. If I stop producing them, I'm going to die. But that's not my purpose in life, to produce red blood cells. Business must make money or it will die. But that's not exactly why it exists. Why does it exist? To create value for its customers. That's why it exists. Doctors heal people, teachers educate, architects design things, engineers construct things for customers. So does business. And so it has this higher purpose, and it should articulate that higher purpose. That unifies stakeholders together.
Well, then do you think there's enough of conscious capitalism going on in society? There's capitalism going on, but do you think there's enough of conscious capitalism going on?
I would like there to be, first of all, there's a lot of what I call unconscious conscious capitalists. They don't know that they're conscious capitalism, but the second key principle are that the stakeholders are interdependent. That doesn't mean all stakeholders are equal. No. I mean, the customers are obviously the most important stakeholder. That's why the business exists. And who's second most important? Well, probably the investors are. And then probably the team members are third after that. Then you have suppliers. Then you have the communities that we're all part of. They're all important. They're all interdependent. And a conscious business is going to take care of all of them, recognizing
but
they're
there's a
interdependent.
ranking.
There is a hierarchy, and there should be. Business is not, people judge business because it doesn't act altruistically all the time. And it's like, what part of our society does? It's human nature to be both self-interested and looking out for yourself and looking out for your families first, and then, but also generous and caring and compassionate. We're both. We're complex beings. This bifurcating people, they're either all completely altruist or they're completely selfish and greedy bastards. That's just wrong. That's not the way human nature is. And business isn't that way, but no other part of our society is either.
You talk about this in your book, and you learned a tough lesson. I think it was back in 2009 when you were hiking on a trail and you found that the Wall Street Journal had published editorial that you had written. They called it the Whole Foods Alternative to Obamacare, 8 things we can do to improve healthcare without adding to the deficit. And it got you in some hot water at the time. People were boycotting your stores. My question for you is not about that. It's about, what do you think you can say now that you are no longer CEO of Whole Foods that you weren't able to say during your entire career because you were worried about people boycotting stores or people coming after you?
It's a great question. And I mean, my big learning from that experience is that people do not separate the CEO from the company, or at least the founder or the entrepreneur of the company. I thought, look, it's America, free speech. I'm expressing my personal views, but no one saw it that way. They saw it, this was Whole Foods views, and so there were boycotts and there were boycotts and there was hundreds of letters coming into maybe even thousands of letters and emails coming into our board demanding I be fired. So I kicked a hornet's nest, and it's like, so I went away from that realizing, okay, I get it. I don't want to hurt my child. So I'm not going to speak up. The board actually instructed me, never ever again write an op-ed piece that we haven't signed off and approved. So what could I say today? I could say anything I want to say, except I'm a place in my life where I've concluded that political talk just gets people so riled up today. We're like these two big tribes that hate each other, and people are constantly trying to sort you out. Which tribe are you in? Because do I love you or do I hate you? And it's like, I'm kind of not in either one of those tribes, because I believe in capitalism. I believe in personal liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of thought, and I don't fit into the two big tribal boxes. So I can now speak about politics, only I've more or less decided I don't want to.
But isn't it interesting coming off the pandemic and George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, where we did see CEOs come out and take positions? And I feel like employees wanted their CEOs and leaders to take positions, and we talked about the importance of it. So what is the balance for a leader who is running a company, and maybe there are some really important issues out there where they should take a stand?
Here's what I did at Whole Foods during that period of time, and this is what I'd actually recommend for other CEOs to do as well. First of all, if an issue is directly related to the purpose of your business, you should take a stand. Whole Foods took stands on animal welfare, seafood sustainability, things that direct organic agriculture or regenerative agriculture. These are things that are directly important to our purpose and why we exist. So I think definitely those are things appropriate to speak up on. But then it's like all the social justice stuff. That's not really Whole Foods Markets. We can't solve all the problems in the world. We're a mission-driven business, and we have to focus on our business. So I remember telling team members that were wanting me to speak up on these issues, and I said, listen, I believe in freedom of speech. So whatever you want to do when you're not at work at Whole Foods, you should do that. You want to advocate for certain political changes, you should do it. But while you're working for our company, we want you to focus on the purpose for why we exist. And we're here to nourish people and the planet. Yeah. We're here, and so that's a big cause, to help people be healthier, eat healthier food. Work on that on our time, and then do whatever you want on your time. And because I can't separate myself, as I told you from the 2009 thing, there's no way I'm going to come out and take these political stands. Right. I can't even. My board wouldn't let me do it anyway. We got kicked really hard on that one. I'm never going to do it again.
I understand that idea of sort of staying in your lane when you're a business. But I also think that in this day and age, there are issues that can affect a business, even if you don't think they will. We were just talking about affordable housing earlier, and the fact that the majority of New Yorkers don't earn enough to live in New York City at a rate that would be deemed, affordable, 30% of your salary. So what happens to a business if it can't find employees because the people can't live in that area where the business is?
I did a whole piece when you guys opened in Detroit. Like, it was a big deal to go into that area.
First of all, I really empathize for that position, because I know when I was CEO of Whole Foods that most of our team members that work in our Manhattan stores don't live in Manhattan, right? They're living in the Bronx or Queens or Brooklyn or some other place. So I am empathetic to that. However, I have a different, I'm going to speak up on politics really briefly. The reason we don't have enough affordable housing is because we've regulated it out of existence. And people ask me what to do about this problem. I say we ought to create, just like some countries create enterprise zones where the rules don't apply. There'd be if a city like New York would set aside in places in Manhattan that would be sort of free building zones where they wouldn't have any taxes for housing. Affordable housing would not be taxed. There'd be no real estate taxes. You'd have different sets of regulations, say on the disability acts. You go to Europe and you don't have all of the, you don't have to put an elevator in everywhere. These areas, I'm not saying those regulations aren't good, but I'm saying if we want to have more affordable housing, that really drives the cost of housing up. And thirdly, manufactured housing is the way to do it, to make affordable housing. If you look at where most poor people in America live, they live in mobile homes. They live in manufactured housing, which is far more affordable. That's not really legal inside many cities. But if we allowed manufactured housing to come in and deregulate some of these areas, you would find Manhattan could have plenty of affordable housing.
Interesting. We have 45 seconds left. Your book is called The Whole Story. There's so much more in there, and I wish we had more time. I don't know. Why do you want people to read this book?
This book is, first of all, it reads like a novel. It's fun. It's full of joy. It's full of love. I mean, the things that I talk about in the book are creativity, entrepreneurship, and love. And this traces my own personal growth, both emotionally, psychologically, as a leader, and spiritually. It's a fun read. I really think people read it, they're going to like it.
I hope you can come back because you obviously have lots to say and it's really engaging and fun. So good luck with it. And maybe when it comes out in paperback, we have you come back. John Mackey, he's co-founder of Whole Foods Market, joining us here in studio. His latest book, his new book, is entitled The Whole Story, Adventures in Love, Life, and Capitalism.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovec live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Now, you might recall, of course, yesterday, Ivan Boesky, who reached the pinnacle of fame and fortune as a high-flying Wall Street arbitrageur in the 1980s, only to be exposed as a cheat in the insider trading scandal that defined the era, passed away. It brought us back to that era. One of Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street, the high-flying greed is good 1980s. It was a very distinct time on Wall Street, that's for sure.
Yeah, our next guest is someone who knows about that era because she lived through it on Wall Street. She started as a receptionist at a brokerage firm at the age of 19 and 30 years later was named global partner at Invesco. Needless to say, Carol, Patricia Walsh Chadwick, well, she's seen a lot.
She has seen a lot, and a lot of that is in her new book. It's called Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. Patricia Walsh Chadwick joining us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I have to tell you, we have one question on our mind. Should we just go there?
Just go there, yeah.
Witch of Wall Street, where did that come from?
You know what? I did not know I was called the Witch of Wall Street until 5 years ago. And it was
Are you serious?
I am serious. It was my 70th birthday party. I don't mind saying that. And there was a woman who said she had met me in 1985. I remembered it well. And she was with Bear Stearns. And she told me that she was told by the head of institutional sales, we have a very big important account at Citibank. One woman runs a lot of the money there. But we have a problem. The men are afraid of her. These are the institutional salespeople.
Because? Go ahead.
Apparently I was fairly demanding, but that was my job. So she said, I had heard of this woman, but I had never met her. And all I knew was on the trading floor, they called her the Witch of Wall Street. And I was oblivious, and I only heard that 5 years ago, been out of Wall Street for a long time. But I decided, I was shocked. I really was. And then I thought about it for a while, and I thought, okay, so maybe I did break some china along the way, and maybe some of the characteristics that might get a man called the Wolf of Wall Street, you know, aggressiveness and, you know, demanding, get a woman called the Witch of Wall Street. And I decided that I would embrace it rather than run away from it.
So you're owning it.
I own it. I own it.
I was just going to say, did it bother you? Or like when you think back and you just, it's interesting because we have a lot of conversations about aggression from a man versus a woman. Unfortunately, we still have it that can often be respected versus a woman is, you know, not a witch, but another word that rhymes with it.
And so precisely.
I'm trying to understand. So take us, like, I don't know. First of all, that era, Like
Yes.
go back. It was a different Wall Street.
It was a very different Wall Street. And there were very few women who would really come in power. And that's why the title is Breaking Glass. I mean, I don't talk about shattering glass or anything, but you get to a certain point and then you're able to break through it.
Right.
And a lot of women aren't. I think women are treated more difficultly in terms of promotions, because I think everything looks like a return on investment. And it's how much do we want to invest in her if she's not going to stay? And not going to stay generally means
Having
if
kids.
she has, yes,
Yeah.
precisely.
Yeah.
And so I think women have to understand and accept that reality and just be even more aggressive. And I don't say that derogatorily. You've just got to be there. You've got to play the hard game if you're going to be in it for the long haul.
Did you have kids?
I did. I was 45 when I had my twins.
Wow.
So I had quite a long haul. And there was, I'll tell you honestly, there was a time when I wondered whether I could be a good businesswoman, a good wife, and a good mother simultaneously. And then when I had them, and it was wonderful for about 6 years.
Yeah.
But very truthfully, I think an important story in my book is that we were on vacation and our children were 5 years old, and we were on the beach, and my husband came home one day with them, and he said, "Sweetheart, we're on the beach swimming, and you're on conference calls." And I thought about that overnight, and I woke up the next morning and I said, "Honey, I'm going to retire." And I retired at the
Yeah.
age of 51.
Yeah.
It was a big step to take, but in my mind, it was the right one for me.
Yeah.
It was the right one for our family and what I did. And I ultimately had another.
Well, I was going to say, you didn't
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
retire.
yeah.
Like, you know, this is
Exactly.
not your first book. And
That's
you were
true.
also, global partner at Invesco, and it's certainly in a second career as a member of many corporate boards.
I did corporate boards and I did expert witness work. So yes, but I do think that women,
But the 9 to 5 grind, it was different, or was it?
the 9 to 5, right? Oh,
Grind, like in terms of your retirement.
it allowed me to do what I did want to do.
Yeah.
I didn't want my children being raised by nannies. And so, I accept the fact, and I think most women have to accept the fact, you're going to have some more difficult choices than likely men are.
Was it the right move to retire at 51?
For me, absolutely. I don't look back with any regret on it at all.
Would you have, if you were to do it again, retired earlier if you could have?
No, I think the time my children were twins and they were 5th grade going into kindergarten, perfect time. I don't have to make all the play dates when they're 2 and 3 and 4.
Right.
But I did want to be there to answer the questions
Yeah.
when they were getting older. So for me, it was perfect.
Well, it's funny because Tim and I have had this conversation because he's back. Well, now it's over a year.
Almost
or
a
so.
year, yeah.
Almost a year that took a paternal leave. A leave after.
But like a real leave, not like,
six months. 6 months.
which
Oh,
is
done.
unheard of.
Which is incredible that our company does.
I was going to say that credit to Bloomberg. That is fantastic.
It was fantastic, and I think it's also changed a lot just in recent years. I mean, I wasn't at Bloomberg when I had my first kid, but I got 2 weeks off at
Yeah.
that point, and it just makes such a difference for when you're raising a family.
But what did we can be real. And I
yeah,
think
be
we've talked
real.
about this on air.
I've talked about a lot. I don't know where you're
We've
going to go
talked
with
about
this.
this on air. No, but the point of that we need men to take that 6 months so that it
Absolutely.
kind of evens the playing field, if you will, right? Of that, I'm not, the female isn't necessarily the only one that disappears from the workforce for 6 months or what have you, that it's good to see both parents doing it.
It's something that is not done very much in our business, the world of finance and investing, but it's done much more in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think we can learn from them.
All right. Take us back, though, to your first job on Wall Street, Citigroup. It wasn't Citigroup, was it yet?
Oh, no.
Citibank.
Was it my very first on
Wall Street.
You mean the receptionist job?
Yes.
Okay. I was 19 years old, and I had been given the job, I hired a job for $90 a week. And I was so proud of myself for
Can
getting
I
the
ask
job.
you what year this was?
This was 1968.
1968.
Okay.
Okay.
But it was more than the minimum wage, so I was very proud of that. And all I wanted to be was the best receptionist in the world. And 6 months later, George Burton, who is one of my mentors, my book is dedicated to my mentors, he brought me into his office and he said, "We're going to give you a raise from $90 a week to $100. And I did my quick arithmetic and went, well, that's 11%, but that's in 6 months, so that's really 22%. And I felt so empowered. And then 2 months later, it was Christmas time, and he called me in and he said, "We're very pleased with your work, and we're going to give you a $1,500 bonus." It was like a third of my salary. I started investing, and that was about the first thing. Literally, less than a year later, he sent me to New York to close a deal. I didn't know what a deal was. I got into New York. I had a limousine that took me around to 5 places. I collected 5 checks, each for $1 million, went back to Boston, presented them to him. He and his partner took me out to dinner at the Ritz-Carlton on Arlington Street. And that night, I lay in bed and said, I wonder if I might ever have a job like theirs someday. So it was from lowly beginnings, but I think that kind of the message of my book is, be adaptable, learn, put your hand up all the time, and little by little, when you are, adaptable, you'll become more confident. When you're more confident, you'll be successful. And it's not a very complicated story.
I want to get right back to our guest. Patricia Walsh Chadwick is the author of Breaking Glass, Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. It's not her first book, but it does detail her decades on Wall Street, starting with the job as a receptionist at the age of 19 and culminating as a global partner over at Invesco. So Patricia, that's exactly where I want to start, is the beginning. And I'm not talking about 19 years old and your job as a receptionist. I'm talking about early on, and because you have an interesting story that I think would surprise a lot of people.
Yes, and that story was my first book. It was called Little Sister. I was born into a religious community in, of all places, Cambridge, Massachusetts, so part of the real involved world, a group of highly intelligent, highly educated people, all Catholics. And they were under the auspices of a priest named Father Leonard Feeney, a renowned Jesuit, and a woman named Catherine Clark, who created the entity, which was really for Catholics at Harvard and Radcliffe and other schools to have an opportunity to meet and talk about their own religion. And during the war, World War II that is, it was very, very popular. And after the war, when all the veterans were coming back, Father Feeney was the most popular lecturer in the world. My parents met there. My father had been a naval officer during World War II. He was getting his graduate degree in philosophy at Boston College. And my mother was 12 years younger, and she was a brand new 18-year-old convert to Catholicism. They met, they got married. A year later, I was born. But under Father Feeney's influence, the organization became very, very, doctrinaire about you had to be Catholic to be saved. And it was at the time that ecumenism was spreading. And the idea was religions should all get together and, they all worship God in one way or another. And let's not, say that we have battlegrounds. But that was not the way they took it. And so pretty soon Father Feeney was no longer allowed to practice as a Catholic priest. My parents stayed with him. In a way, that was the only world I knew. And there were 60 adults. Yeah. Among that were 12 married couples. And then 39 children came along. I was one of the oldest. And all of a sudden, things really started to change. We had a number of houses in Cambridge, and they built a big red stockade fence. So now the whole world was shut out.
It's like a compound.
A compound, absolutely. And when I was 6, the children were separated from the parents. And then the parents were arm twisted, seriously, to take vows of celibacy. And my father said, absolutely not. And Father Feeney came back to him. And finally, Father Feeney said to him, you're the one couple, the only holdout of the 12. Mm-hmm. So they felt they had to do it. They really wanted us to have a very Catholic education. Years later, one of the other children told me his parents told him the very same story. Wow. So it had been this divide and conquer.
Right.
And now the children were not being brought up by the parents were not able to be together. And it was a monastic environment. Mm-hmm. Silence most of the day. We're not allowed to address our parents, speak to them at all. And so people say, well, why did they do that and all of that? That was their decision, for better or for worse.
Right.
But my father used to break the rules, and breaking the rules to me was what told me that he loved me. Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, I never blamed my parents. Somehow, I think I was a bright little girl, but somehow I blamed Catherine Clark, whom we called Sister Catherine, and Leonard Feeney for separating my parents. And again, I never thought of it as a cult. You will
Yeah.
not see the word cult in my first book.
Yeah.
It was my home. It was my daughter when she was 20 years old and came home from college. And she said, Mom, I have 2 things to tell you. I'm thinking, what is that? And she said, first, you need to stop
Never
everything.
a good start.
You have to stop everything until you finish this book. And then she said, and you have to accept the fact that you grew up in a cult. I never thought of it that way. It was my home, and I
Yeah.
loved it in many ways. But ultimately, I accept the fact that it was a cult. And then when I was about 14 or 15, I started having crushes on boys. Now, that was not going to keep me in the community. Sister Catherine wanted every one of the children to grow up, remain celibate for life. I would be a bride of Christ. But I had these dreams of a prince coming into the garden and sweeping me off. And, you know, we would go off and live in a castle and have lots of children. Not that I knew how any of that would happen. And the next thing I knew, she'd kicked me out. No opportunity to come back.
How old were you when you were kicked out?
17. I had just graduated from high school. We were schooled within our own community.
Yeah.
I'd never, seen a television show, never read a newspaper, never been to a grocery store, never held a dollar bill for
Where
a
did
gal.
you go?
Well, so I had been accepted at 2 colleges because they needed the school to be accredited. And I was a good student, and I got into Vassar, and I got into Bates, where my father had gone.
Yeah.
She made me write a letter saying that I wasn't coming. She said it would be that I would lose my soul if I went to college. So she allowed me to go to a secretarial school so that I could get
Right,
the
that you
necessary
need to-
skills to be able to earn my own living. And my first place to live was at a room in the YWCA in a not very fashionable section of Boston.
How does something like that? You seem pretty normal.
Oh, but I'm not.
I don't even know what normal is anymore. But you know what I mean. And you've done really well. And I just wonder, though, what of that still stays with you or impacted you as you ventured out into the world?
And also raised your own family.
And raised,
And
yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. I mean, I look back on my life. I know it was very abnormal and very strange, but I look back and I wouldn't change anything. I'm not saying I wouldn't have had more time with my parents. Of course
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
have.
yeah.
But I think the way one's path goes in life ultimately leads you to where you are, happily married, 2 children, who one of them's now engaged. I mean, they're 30 years old now. They're young adults. And I just think sometimes you're given the ability to get over the things that aren't good and find the best in them. Sister Catherine herself was never a mentor to me, but I believe she was a role model. This was a woman who ran a community of 100 people. Not one man pushed back on her. Not one woman pushed back on her. And I think when I got into that dog-eat-dog world of Wall Street, subliminally in the back of my mind, my only model was someone who ran things and was a woman.
Right.
And I think I just went, okay, that's what I got to do. I'm going to do this. I never thought I can't do that because I'm a woman. So I have to give her a little credit.
So maybe that's the perfect segue to getting from your first job or your first role to one where you move to the business side. You said you lay awake at night wondering how you could become one of those deals people.
Yes.
So how did you do that?
It was little baby steps, let me tell you. One of the first things I did was by the age 21, I became a stockbroker. I didn't end up getting customers. I just thought I can do that. Then I had to do those S&P tear sheets. You're both way too young to know what they are. But
Memorize
they were books.
tickers?
Pardon me?
Did you memorize tickers?
I memorized every ticker on the New York Stock Exchange. And I would go into the trading room and I would give myself tests. And I just found the whole thing so exciting. And by the time I moved to Philadelphia with my best girlfriend, I was becoming an assistant to the analysts. And the one thing I said of them, there were 6 men that I was reporting to. I said, listen, I don't want to just put numbers on a piece of paper for you. I want to learn what those numbers mean. And I want you to promise me that you'll answer all the questions I have. I was ready to walk away from that job if they had said, no, we just want you to give us the numbers. They kept their words, every one of them. And I walked away after 2 years. wasn't even 25 yet. And I understood how the trucking industry worked, and the airline industry, and the insurance industry. And so from there, it was just a little step bigger till I became an analyst.
Well, it's like you have this incredible story, and understanding that story is an important part of you, but understanding, I think we feel that way, like investment stories, like understanding the story or the fundamentals or what something really is, rather than just a sheet of numbers, right, and understanding it.
Absolutely.
30 seconds left. What would you like to share with our audience?
Well, I do think for young people, and I love mentoring, it's important to have mentors in your life. It is also really important to be adaptable.
Yeah.
I think put your hand up, say yes. Ask someone for help. Don't be afraid to. And you'll find little by little, the first time it's hard, and then you have more confidence, and then you build up your own resilience. And I think everyone should have a mentor. There's no such thing as a bad mentor. They're either a mentor or they're not.
If you were starting today, 15 seconds left, would you still go to Wall Street, do you think?
I love it. So
okay.
for me, I adore it.
Just checking to see if like you're feeling about it.
Yes, and I think it can be a great place for women. It really can.
All right, love it. Promise you'll come back when the paperback comes out.
Or even sooner.
Or even
this was
sooner.
great.
Or even sooner. What an amazing tale. Has Netflix called and said we need to make this into a series?
There have been little talks about different little things.
I would watch
Good question.
that. All right, Patricia Walsh Chadwick, former global partner at Invesco, her book, Breaking Glass Tales from the Witch of Wall Street, joining us here in studio. This is definitely going to be in our weekend show.